life of Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu, the uncle of the Blessed Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we completed most of the details that we have about him that are mentioned in the seerah books, in the history books, and his biography. So we're just going to conclude basically with just a few small notes, and inshallah we will start with the Sahabi Abu Ayyub Ansari radiyallahu anhu right after. So just to recap on some of the things we already know about Hamzah radiyallahu anhu was that he was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he was also his milk brother because both of them had been nursed by the same woman. So they were also brothers. And though he was his uncle, he was only 2 to 3 years older than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if I remember correctly, the last incident that we mentioned or narrated before we ended our session was about the time when Hamzah radiallahu anhu was in a state of intoxication, and that was from a hadith of Sahih Bukhari. Here's our final point, and that is how much did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam love Hamzah bin Ibn-Abdul-Muttalib radiyallahu anhu. So we know Hamzah ibn Abdul-Muttalib was one of the only 2 uncles who accepted Islam and accepted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The other one, as we all know, was Abbas ibn Abdul-Muttalib. But of these 2 uncles, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved Hamzah radiyallahu anhu the most, even though Abbas radiyallahu anhu lived much longer. In fact, even after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, Abbas ibn Abdul-Muttalib radiyallahu anhu was alive and lived for a long time after that as well. Whereas Hamzah radiyallahu anhu, as we know, was martyred in the Battle of Uhud. How he was martyred, we had talked about that many sessions ago when we were talking about his killer, who was Wahshi ibn Harb, who also became a Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's mentioned, I'm just going to mention one small portion of it, not the whole incident all over again, that he was basically buying his freedom by killing Hamzah radiyallahu anhu, and he was known as an expert javelin thrower. So he was looking for his chance in the Battle of Uhud, which took place in the 3rd year of Hijri, to kill Hamzah radiyallahu anhu. And he saw that Hamzah radiyallahu anhu had killed a lot of people from Quraysh. He was causing havoc in the sufuf of Quraysh, and they really wanted him down. So he was looking for his chance to find a clear path where he could shoot and it would hit him directly. And since there were so many people around Hamzah radiyallahu anhu, it was very difficult for him to make him a target without hurting somebody else also. He finally got his chance when Hamzah radiyallahu anhu killed one person and he was near the edge of the battlefield. He waited for him to come a little bit closer, and then he made his mark, he shot, and it went right through the navel of Hamzah ibn Abdul-Muttalib and it came out the other side. Hamzah radiallahu anhu saw Wahshi ibn Harb, but of course there was no chance for him to move on. He died right there. He collapsed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with martyrdom, shahadat. But that wasn't the end. Quraysh still had to settle a score with Hamzah radiallahu anhu and many of the other shuhada of Uhud who had killed many of the leaders and big people, chiefs of Quraysh in the Battle of Badr. So to settle that score and to kind of vent their anger, they mutilated the bodies of many of the Sahaba in the Battle of Uhud by cutting off their ears and their noses. And in the case of Hamzah ibn Abdul-Muttalib, even disemboweling him, and Hind bint Utbah even removed his liver and chewed on it, and she spat it out because she could not consume it. So, of course, one could imagine the state of his body at that time. It was probably even hard to recognize him, since his nose had been removed, his ears had been removed, right? So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to the body of Hamzah ibn Abdul-Muttalib Radhi-Allahu anhu, فَنَظَرَ إِلَى مَنظَرٍ لَمْ يَنظُرْ إِلَى مَنظَرٍ أَوْجَعَ لِلْقَلْبِ مِنْهُ. He saw something, he had never seen anything before that was more painful to his heart. Like if there's any time that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam suffered severely, it was the time when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw Hamzah ibn Abdul-Muttalib, his mutilated body on the battlefield of Uhud. That was the most painful, heartbreaking moment for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَنَظَرَ إِلَيْهِ وَقَدْ مُثِّلَ بِهِ. He saw him in the state that he was completely mutilated. But it's very interesting what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said after this. He says, Rahmatullahi alayka. May the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon you, my uncle Hamza. In kunta ma alimtu la wusulan lirrahimi. For as far as I know, you were a person la wusulan lirrahimi, who kept his ties with his family members. No matter how much people wanted in his family to break ties with him, even if they were his non-Muslim family members, he would not allow them to break ties. He would keep his relationships with them because it was a fard. You have to keep relationships with all your family members, even if they're not believers. That's the hukum of Allah. That's the hukum of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, we know how Hamzah radiallahu anh accepted Islam. It was through his strong connection with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm not going to repeat that incident of how he accepted Islam, but we know that he reacted when he saw that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was beaten or was criticized and admonished by Abu Jahl, and he was so angry by that castigation that he said, what are you going to do? I've accepted Islam too. That was because of his love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, love for his family. So that was one very powerful, beautiful quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed Hamzah ibn Abdul-Muttalib with. Number two, the second thing he mentions is فَعُولًا لِلْخِيرَاتِ. فَعُولًا is an Arabic form on the wazn of fa'ul. Fa'ul is the wazn or a form in Arabic which means when any verb comes on this form, it means somebody does something a lot. He does a lot of this. Fa'ulan would mean he does a lot of khayrat, a lot of sadaqat, good deeds, giving donations in the path of Allah. So he was a very open-hearted person. These are two qualities that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioning about Hamzah radiallahu anhu. That you had these two blessed qualities. I'm sure the rahmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be upon you. Even though he's a martyr, and we know about a martyr that every sin is forgiven. But you had these two qualities, outstanding qualities, that for sure, inshaAllah, will be your ticket to Jannah, inshaAllah. Because these are two qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved. And of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved them. That's why he's mentioning them in the first place. Wallahi, I swear by Allah, لولا حزن من بعدك عليك. If it wasn't for the fact that I would be extremely grief-stricken, لسرني, it would make me happy. أن أتركك حتى يحشرك الله من بطون السباع. I would like to leave you here in the battlefield without being buried in the ground. And I would allow the animals of the desert to come and eat from your body. And on the day of judgment, you would rise from their stomachs. To prove that you died as a martyr in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I would not be able to handle it because of my love for you. therefore I will bury you. Right? This also tells us about the level of love that Rasulullah ﷺ had for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over all other things, including his uncle. I love you. I love you so much. But the greatest amal is shahada. And the greatest proof of shahada is that you would rise in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the state as a shaheed from the stomachs of different animals. And then you would say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, I died in your battlefield. My body was left there. The animals of the desert ate from it. And here I am in front of you now. Right? To be given, to give your life up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ama wallah, wallahi alayya dhalik la umathilanna bi-sab'ina. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam made an oath by the name of Allah. Wallahi, I swear by the name of Allah, now it's wajib upon me, compulsory, that I must mutilate 70 to equal the death and the mutilation of the body of Hamzah. Because you are equal to 70 people. So in order for me to avenge you, I would have to do what? 70 people. This is before the rulings came down about mutilation not being permissible. Right? There's a whole bunch of rulings that came down later in relation to acts of war. Okay? Remember, ayahs are still being revealed. Rasulullah ﷺ is still being informed about what he can and cannot do. Sharia is still in the beginning stages. So there's many things that sometimes we read in the hadith that it sounds a little bit off to us, but that's because the Sharia is now complete. At that time it wasn't. So for now, it may seem really strange to us, but remember when it was still being revealed, for them all these things were still unknown. They were learning. Even Rasulullah ﷺ was in the learning process. Many times Sahaba would come to Rasulullah ﷺ, ask him a question that we know the answer to now, but Rasulullah ﷺ didn't know the answer to then. What's the answer to this? So Allah, He waited for an ayah of Quran Kareem about it. There is a Sahabi of Rasulullah ﷺ. He made a mistake. He kissed a woman. And he was very regretful. He came to Rasulullah ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, whatever the punishment is for this, give it to me. I'm willing to take it. Whatever punishment you want to give me, I'll take it. I committed a crime. I disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I disobeyed you. Now I will pay the price. Whatever you say. Rasulullah ﷺ stayed quiet because there's nothing mentioned. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayah, وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ طَرَفَيَ النَّهَارِ وَظُلُفًا مِنَ اللَّيْلِ إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. Pray salah in the 2 parts of the day and a portion of the night. This is 5 times salah. 5 times salah. And then these 5 salahs, what will they do? إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. The good deeds will erase and remove the bad deeds. In other words, when you pray your salah, inshallah, it will purify you of your bad deeds. But only if you feel nadamat. If you feel regret. You do a bad deed and you come to masjid and say, inshallah, it's all forgiven, and go back, do it tomorrow. Huh? It's not like that. There has to be regret. Otherwise, somebody go back again and say, okay, somebody else now. So, ayahs were revealed and Rasulullah ﷺ informed accordingly. So in this case, we look at this and we think, but is this allowed? Well, at that time it was allowed. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayah. فَنَزَرَ جِبْرَيْلَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ بِهَذِهِ السُّورَةِ. And in this surah, he revealed, the ayahs were revealed upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَإِنْ عَاقَبْتُمْ فَعَاقِبُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبْتُمْ بِهِ. If you are going to seek revenge, then you can only seek as much revenge as harm as you were given yourself. You can only do as much as the oppressor did to you, or the perpetrator did to you. No more than that. But وَلَئِن صَبَرْتُمْ, but if you are patient, that's better. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you're permitted to do the same thing back, but it's better if you restrain yourself and be patient for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always with the sabirin. Inna Allaha ma'as sabirin. People think sabr means when you face hardship, right? No. Sabr, there's 3 different types of sabr. 3 different types of sabr. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Quran Kareem, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Seek help through sabr and salah. So seek help through sabr. Now if sabr here means hardship, does that mean that you're going to look for hardship so you can do sabr? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, put yourself in danger or in hardship and then be patient? Because then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be with you. Until then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be with you. No, sabr here means sabr ala ta'a. Sabr ala ta'a means to be patient on doing good deeds. That's a form of sabr as well. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, next portion of this ayah says, bis-sabri was-salah. When we pray salah, we're being patient at that time too. Because we could be doing something else, but we restrain ourselves that at this time I should be here doing this and nothing else. I wanted to read Quran. No, this is the time for salah. I wanted to do that. No, I'm going to pray salah. This is sabr. You're holding yourself. You're restraining yourself to do ta'ah, to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a form of sabr. This is the sabr that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about in this ayah. Even when you do that type of sabr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with the sabirin. It's not just sabr when you face hardship. He's got Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with him. What about me? I haven't faced danger. Ya Allah, give me some type of hardship. No. That's the first type of sabr. Then there's sabr ala raziyya. Sabr upon hardship, which we all know. Right? And then there's a third type of sabr, sabr anil ma'asiyah. To restrain yourself from committing evil deeds. You want to do something bad, but you hold yourself back, you restrain yourself for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is also a form of sabr. And for this, you are also gaining the privilege of being amongst those people with whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah ma'as sabirin. So sabirin doesn't mean just those people that face hardship and bear it with forbearance and patience. Sabr also means people who may not face any hardship in their lives, but they're always obedient to Allah and His Rasul and stay away from ma'asiyah. They're also amongst the sabirin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also with them. So that one a little bit off the topic, but this is something for us to remember. وَلَئِن صَبَرْتُمْ, if you are patient, then that is better. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam broke his oath because he's being told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's better if you don't keep your oath. He was going to say what? What was his oath? Now I'm going to take revenge by 70 people as collateral for the death of Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu. Right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying it's better if you don't do it. It's better if you don't do it. Now, you know what we always say? Whenever you have two choices, one is harder and one is easier, always choose the easier path because Rasulullah always chose the easier path. So let's take the easier path, right? But if you look here, Rasulullah took the harder path. It would be easier for him to fulfill his desire for revenge and take revenge. The harder choice was to be patient and not seek revenge at all and just forgive and forget. He took the second option, the harder one. When it came to his ummah, he always took the easier approach, but when it came to himself, he took the harder one. So if you want to follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you want to follow the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever you're given two choices and you have the easier one, the easier choice and the harder one, and you can handle the harder one, then if you handle it with the intention to fulfill the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then inshallah you get the reward of going against your nafs because you took the harder path, and you get the reward for the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? Because nowadays everybody is about taking the easiest path. Easiest path. And when you keep on taking the easiest path, then a point comes where you start reaching the borders. Keep on getting easier, until your nafs takes control. I just was talking to one of my family members and they were telling me in their city, the imam in their city, the masjid, he's saying things like, and he's like one of the ulama who is a graduate from our madaris, not from some university. But he's talking like this because he's been also corrupted by this virus that's spreading all over the world now, the fitna of Dajjal. So he's telling people that, LGBTQ is okay. And he's telling this to kids, the youth, in their community. People are in Taraweeh, and if they're sitting down, he says, no, just stay in the masjid. You don't have to pray as long as you just, stay in the masjid and just sit down and just watch while the Taraweeh is going on. Instead of encouraging them to get up and pray and tell them all the rewards for praying Taraweeh, he's telling them, no, just stay seated. Don't worry about it. Take it easy. We reached that point now. So this is how the nafs is. You give it a little bit of leeway, it wants a little more. You give it a little bit more, he says just a little bit more. And there's no end to it. And then a point comes where a person becomes wahshi, wild, out of control. Can't control himself anymore. Does crazy things, acts crazy, does crazy things. Becomes like a beast, like an animal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. We have up to 7:30. Anyhow, one or two more things inshallah and then we'll finish. Anas radhiyallahu anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did takbir. How many takbīrs are there for Salatul Janazah? 4 takbīrs, right? So there was 70 takbir on the janazah of Hamzah radhiyallahu anhu. 70 takbir. And that's not because, the reason is because there was the janazah of Hamzah radhiyallahu anhu. That's 4 takbirs. But thereafter, whenever any one of the other shuhada of Uhud were brought forward and their janazah was led by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't move Hamzah radhiyallahu anhu's janazah, he kept it there. So therefore, his janazah kept on being repeated with the janazah of other sahaba. Repeatedly. So once his own janazah and then another group of sahaba are being brought, but his not being removed, that's another janazah. Salatul janazah. And then those group of sahaba are being removed, and then another group, and then their janazah, and he's still there. So then 70 takbir. That's a lot of sahaba that were being brought, removed, another group brought, removed. And then when they were going to bury him, they didn't have enough cloth because the cloth was so small, and Hamzah radhiyallahu anhu was tall. So when they would cover his head, The legs would be uncovered. When they would cover the legs, the head would be uncovered. There was another Sahabi who was also martyred. He was from the Ansar. His name was Suhail Radhi-Allahu. So a group of the Ansar, they had 2 pieces of cloth, but what happened was, they said it's not good that Suhail Radhi-Allahu doesn't have any cloth, so let's do qur'ah. That which cloth are we going to give to who? So there was a large piece of cloth and there was a smaller piece of cloth. So when they did the qur'ah, they drew the lots. The larger cloth came in the name of Suhail Radhi-Allahu. So they gave him the larger piece of cloth, and Hamzah Radhi-Allahu came got the smaller piece of cloth, but it wasn't covering his body. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, cover his body with ifkhar. Even though he was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he should have gotten the bigger cloth, but this was the level of fairness and justice and caring and sharing and the spirit of brotherhood in Islam. That was the spirit of brotherhood in Islam, right? Once a man came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he just had a little baby boy. So he says, فَقُلْتُ وُلِدَ لِي غُلَامٌ فَمَا أُسَمِّي. I just had a baby boy. What should I name him? He said, سَمِّهِ بِأَحَبِّ النَّاسِ إِلَيَّ. Name him after the one who is most beloved to me, Hamzah. So that child's name was given by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after his uncle, Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu, just to show how much Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu. He also asked his killer, even after he accepted Islam, Wahshi, he said to him, listen, if you could do me a favor and never please show me your face for as long as I live. Be in the majlis, sit with us, but I don't want to see you because every time I see you, I remember my uncle. So Wahshi says, Radhi-Allahu anhu, for as long as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was alive, I was in Medina Munawwara with him, but I would never ever cross his path or come in front of him, behind him, at a safe distance from him, so he could not see me, because I did not want to cause any pain to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is love for Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu, because he was a human being just like we are. قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. I'm a human being just like you. I'm a human being just like you. He feels grief, heartbreak, and all the range of emotions that human beings have. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun al mursalin alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Inshallah, from next week we will start with Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu. Jazakumullah khair, ahsan jaza.